PowerPoint here, and I want to say hello to everybody. And as DJ said, this is my Decorative Quilter 2 block of the month. This is our last in the series of this particular quilt. Today we're going to be creating a quilt label, and we're going to be finishing up the quilt. This project and all of them in the series have been created for you by Rita Gizzard and presented by myself, Mark Garrett. I'm a National Floriani educator. So I always like to do, before we get into the specifics of the software and the construction details, I like to show you a picture of what we are headed towards, so what the project is going to look like. So as we go through the steps, you have an idea of where we are headed with it. So this is our quilt label, and it's pretty straightforward. We're going to be working with text a lot today and this built-in border design to create the label. And then we're also going to be finishing up our quilt. And here is a picture of one idea of the way to finish this quilt and the way it was done with the fabrics that we've been using throughout. And so you can just kind of remember what that looks like in your head. And we're going to get now right into the software part of our webinar today. So I'm going to go ahead and bring up Total Quilter. And if you haven't done it already, I want you to go ahead and come up here to the corner and click the new page icon. So create a new page. And when you do that, your page ought to look something like this. But we're going to first, as we always do, get our pages set up so that our screens look about the same. And the way we're going to do that is set up our grid and other things. Now, as we go through the software part of this today, if I tell you to simply click, I mean a left click on the mouse, so like a normal click on the mouse. And if I tell you to right click, obviously that means a right click. So what I want you to do is bring your cursor up so you're hovering over the top ruler, like you can see that I'm doing here, and go ahead and right click on it. Actually, there we go. Okay, that was just me, my fingers, not the software. Just so you want to make sure you're in inches mode here. You want to make sure that show grid is checked. And if either snap to grid or snap to anchors is checked, you want to uncheck them. And then finally come down here to grid settings and click that. And that will open up our options window, allowing us to set our grid options. You want your spacing, your horizontal and your vertical, to be at 0.5, so a ½ inch on both the horizontal and vertical here. And over here in our grid major, you want that set to 8 and 8. All right, and that's the purple big lines. And then once you've done that, we're going to go ahead and click OK to lock in those settings. And when you do that, your screen ought to look something like this. So the first step in this software project is we're going to bring in our quilt label border, and to do that we are going to use one of the built-in borders that comes with the software, and it's located right here. Okay, so there's an icon, and it's for adding in a border. So if you click it, you will bring up a window that's going to show you a selection of borders to choose from, and the one we're going to use is called FQHO015. So you're going to have to scroll down quite a bit to get to the H zeros. And right here, HO015, FQHO015 is right here. So we're going to click that. And when you do that, it's going to bring in that embroidery pattern, which is a oval border. And we're going to use that as our border for the quilt label. So the first thing we're going to do with this is we're going to make it the proper size, because it comes in at about a little under 4 inches, and we want it to be bigger than that. So what you're going to do is come over here to your properties box, and you're going to go to the very last tab here and click on it, and that's the transform tab. And one of the things that is cool about this transform tab is right in here. So first of all, we want to make sure that maintain aspect ratio is checked, and what that does is when we change either the width or the height, the other one is going to change proportionally to track it so that our design stays in the same aspect ratio so we don't squish or stretch it. And one of the things that's really nice about this is you'll notice right here there's a millimeters and an inches selection. And this lets us work in this little box right here in either inches and millimeters independent of what our ruler is set to. So we've set our ruler up in inches, but we want to work here in millimeters. So if you have inches selected, you'll see that right now the width and the height are in inches, and we've got 3.74 inches. But what you want to do is click millimeters over here, and you'll see that it changes to 95 and 81.6. So what we're going to do is come over here, and we are going to type in over the top of this a new width. So we're going to put in 145 millimeters. So I'm going to type in 145 and click Apply to lock that change in. And when that happens, the software is actually going to recalculate all those stitches to resize this design to the proper size. And you can see it got so big it's heading off of our screen here. We'll take care of that in a second. But the next thing we need to do is we want to get this design centered up with respect to our ruler. So we want this center point, which is this little X right here, on 0, 0. So 0 in the horizontal and 0 in the vertical. Now we could drag it around and try and do that manually, but there's a much, much easier way to do that, and that is with our alignment tool, which is right here. So if you click the alignment tool, you'll see there's a whole bunch of options. Right now, most of those are grayed out, but the next to last one, that one is called Center to Rulers, which is exactly what we want to do. So we're going to click that, and that is going to move the center of that design to be at 0, 0. Now you see when it did that, it moved it most of the way off of my screen, and depending on what your screen looks like, it might even move all the way off. That's okay. It's going to be a real easy way to get it back in the screen, and that's to come over here to your magnifying glass and double-click it. And when you do that, that is what we call a shortcut for Zoom to Fit. And Zoom to Fit is a function that zooms the image out so we can see the whole screen, everything we're working with, and also centers the screen on our screen. So you can see now our design is perfectly centered on our ruler. So we're at 0 and 0, and you can see it's right there in the center, which is perfect. So the next thing we're going to do is we're going to start adding our text for the label. And the way we do that is with our text tool, and it's located right here. So go ahead and click that. And when you do that, you'll see that your cursor changes to an A with a little asterisk by it. Now that asterisk means that if I were to click now, I would put in brand new text, and that's of course what we want to do. And we're going to put in a line right here at the top that says 2016. So I'm going to come kind of over here into this area, and I am going to click. And when I do that, the software is automatically going to put in the words my text. That's always the default text that it puts in. And it's going to use the last font that we were using. So now we're going to come over here and take a look at my properties box for this particular text. And you can see here, this is the main text box, and this is where it says my text. And the first thing we're going to do is we're going to change that to read 2016. So I'm going to click and drag over the back of it, and I am going to type in 2016. And you'll notice nothing's happening over here because I haven't clicked apply yet. And we want to make sure that we're in the right font. So the last font that I used was Andrew, and in fact that's the font that we are going to use for this label. But I just want to show you how you would change the font if you're not already on Andrew, which you probably won't be. You just click this down arrow right here, and you can select any of the fonts. Now, as you can see, as I hover over these fonts, you can see what they look like. So, for example, Broadcast here, it's got, in our little preview window, you can see that it's got a capital ABC and a lowercase ABC. Now, that tells us right away that this particular font has both upper and lowercase letters. But if I come down here to Circus, you can see that there's only uppercase because this is more of a decorative font, and it doesn't have lowercase letters. So this is a real cool indication real quickly to show you if it's got upper and lowercase. So we're going to come back up to Andrew, and we're going to click on that. And you can see Andrew's got upper and lowercase. And you notice as I'm pointing over it, this little dialog box pops up. Before I could even tell you about it, it went away. So I'm going to come over here, and I'm going to hover back over it. And you can see now that I can see all the possible characters that are in this font. And oh, it went away again. Let's try this one more time. All right, and then if you look down at the bottom, you can see that I've got the recommended minimum and maximum heights. Now you can see that that keeps going away. I'm doing that on purpose because I want you to see that while it's good for a quick look. If you really want to spend some time on that window, having it go away like that can be a little bit annoying. So the good news is that we've got a button that makes it stay, and that's this little question mark button right here over to the right of our font selector. So if I click that little question mark, now I get a new dialog box. It shows me all that same information, and now it's going to stay there until I either click OK or the little X up in the corner here to close it. So you can see again, here's all the characters available in that font. Here's the minimum and maximum heights in inches and in millimeters. And while these are recommendations, and you can go outside of these, it's recommended that you stay within these parameters to get this font to stitch out optimally. So we're going to go ahead and click OK to get rid of that. So I just wanted to show you that part of this text box. While we're talking about the text box, let's look at some other things here. Here I've got right here an alignment, and it defaults to center. This really doesn't matter if all we've got one line of text, because whether it's centered or right or left, it doesn't matter. So we're going to leave it on center. And here's my height control. This controls the height of the capital letters. So right now it's defaulting to 0.79. And actually we're going to change it in just a second. Here's a spacing control. The spacing control controls the spacing between the characters. And 0, meaning normal spacing, is the default. I've got a line spacing control. This only comes into play when we have more than one line of text. You can see that it's set to a percentage, and it's set to 25% by default, and it's a percentage of the height. So that's what the percentage is. And then lastly, I've got a width control, and that width control is, again, a percentage of the normal width when the height is set. So these two interact, all right? So I control the height and the width with this, but if I want to leave the height alone and just make it less wide or more wide, I can control it with this percentage. And lastly over here, I've got a slant control, and the slant control is how I control my italics. All right, so we will look at these a little bit later, but what we're going to do right now is we are going to come in here and we are going to type in 0.5 for the height of 2016. Okay, so we're going to make it ½ an inch high. We're going to click apply to lock that new height in. So it's going to change our text to 2016, and it's going to lock the height in. Now we need to get this aligned to the center, and we're going to use this grid line here in the center, our boulder grid line, to get it aligned. And before we do that alignment, I am going to get out of what we call text mode. Now, what do I mean by that? Right now, I am in text mode. So if I zoom into this for you so you can see the controls on this 2016 a little bit better, I'm going to go back into text mode here. You can see that I've got little icons at all the edges, and I've got some icons running through the center. So let's talk about the ones on the edge first. All right, actually, we're going to come back to what they do. But when you see the text looking like this, this is an indication that you are in text mode, and you have all these little icons, which we call our text controls. So when you see all of these, you're in text mode. You can also tell that you're in text mode because your text mode icon is got an orange box around it. Now over here is our regular select icon, and it is not lit up. It's not got an orange box around it. So these are the indications that we are in text mode. So if I click the regular select tool, you'll see a couple things happen. This box turns orange. This one is no longer orange. And look at my text controls. They are no longer there. Now I've got my normal bounding box controls, which are my sizing and my rotate controls. I've also got something that shows me the center of this design, which is that little X. So I'm going to use that little X. I'm going to put that X on this line. Before I do that, though, I'm going to use that trick of zooming to fit by double-clicking the magnifying glass so I can get a sense of where I am in this whole design. And I'm going to click and drag that over. Now, as I do that, you can see that I've got a little outline, but my little X disappears. So I'm going to have to kind of think about where it is. And you can see that I'm still a little bit off. So I'm going to move it over a little bit more, and I'm still a little bit off. So this gives me an opportunity to show you another thing you can do with the software that's a really cool thing, and that is something we call our nudge controls. Now, we've used this in the past, but we're going to go over it again right now. And the nudge controls allow me, using my keyboard, to just move this text around in very, very tiny increments. And why it's useful right here is because when I do that, I can still see this little X and I can still see the centering of it. So the way you use your nudge controls is by holding down the Control key on your keyboard and pressing the arrow keys on your keyboard at the same time. So I apologize that you can't see me doing this, but I'm going to start holding down the Control key. And then if I press my up, down, left, or right arrow keys, I will move this text around. So I need to come over to the right. So I'm just going to tap my left arrow key a couple times here to where I get it centered. I think I just went one too far. So I'm going to come back one. And that looks pretty good right there. Actually, you know what? I'm going to go back to where I was. So I'm going to nudge back, and I think that looks perfect. All right. So I've got that one done. Now what we want to do is we want to add a second line of text. So again, what I'm going to do is come back to my text tool and select it. And you'll notice that right now when I did that, because I had my text selected with my normal select tool, it reselected it in text mode. And you'll notice that my cursor now no longer has the asterisk by it. So if I click off it somewhere to deselect that one, you'll see that my cursor has the asterisk reappear. So if I were to click anywhere now, just like I said before, it's going to put in a new line of text. But watch what happens as I get close to the text I already have. You can see that as it gets close to it, that little asterisk disappeared. What it's trying to tell me is that if I click now, instead of putting in new text, I'm going to reselect this text in text mode. So I'm going to do that for you. Watch. If I click now, it's going to reselect that text in text mode. To get off of that, I'm going to click away from it. My asterisk comes back, and now I'm going to click down in here because I'm going to put in a big line of text going across. And you can see again that once again put in my text as the default. So we're going to come up to our text box, and this time we're going to type in MDQ, and I'm going to use all caps, MDQ, and then a space, and then two capital I's, II, for the Roman numeral 2. So I'm going to put in II, another space, and then I'm going to put in BOM for block of the month. And once I've done that, I'm going to set my height, and this time I'm going to set my height to 0.6. So I'm going to come in here and type 0.6, and I'm going to click Apply. All right? And when it does that, it puts that text in, and I'm going to position it. Now, when I position it, I've got a lot of controls going on here. So if I want to move this, I better make sure that I see that little hand. When I see the hand, that tells me that I can click and drag this whole text object around. So I'm going to click and drag it and kind of get it centered in here. And I'm going to zoom into this because now we're going to take a look at some of our other text controls. So I'm going to grab my zoom tool, and I am going to drag a box around this so I can work with that. And very important thing, if you do that, make sure you get back out of zoom mode because you can see my cursor is still a magnifying glass saying if I click now, I'm going to zoom in some more. I'm going to go back to text mode by clicking my text tool, and we are going to discuss what all these cool text icons do. So we're going to start up here in the upper left-hand corner, and I've got two icons real close to each other. One, the outermost one, looks like a little house or a home plate icon, and if I hover over it, you can see that my cursor changes into a crosshair. When that happens, that's telling me that if I click and drag now, I'll be affecting what's behind that icon. And what that affects is the height of my characters. So it's the same thing as changing it numerically over here, but it's actually allowing me to change it visually. So watch what happens when I click and drag this. If I click and drag towards the center of the text, it's going to get smaller. If I click and drag away from the text, it's going to get bigger. So this is a really useful tool for resizing my text where I want it to be. So I'm going to purposefully make it smaller than I want it and let off so you can see that. What happens is it made it smaller. If we look over here in my height controls, I'm no longer back at 0.6, I'm at 0.55. And it's important to remember that this control, like this control, resizes everything proportionally. So this is like your text sizing control. So I could go back to 0.66 by typing it because I remember what it is, but I can also use my favorite key of all time in the software, and that's the undo button. So I'm going to click undo, and I'm going to go right back to 0.6. And let's continue our tour of what these text controls do. If you look down here in the lower right-hand corner, you can see I've got the same icon, but this one is tipped over. And this icon is exactly the same as my width control. So this allows me to change my width visually rather than numerically. So watch what happens when I click and drag this. Now, as I mentioned earlier, I just want to reiterate, the width changes the width of the characters, but not the height. So watch what happens when I do this. I click and drag towards the text, and it is going to make the characters skinnier. And if I drag out, it's going to stretch them out. This is a really useful tool for putting little fine adjustments on getting text to fit in a perfect spot for you without having to worry about the inner character spacing and other things like that. So I use this a lot when I'm trying to get text to fit things. So for example, if I come and I put it right here, which is considerably smaller, and I let off, you'll see that my width is now 89% instead of 100%. So again, I'm going to undo that to go back. All right, so that's a very, very useful control. Continuing around, this one in the upper right-hand corner is my rotate control. So if I click and drag that, I can rotate this text around anywhere around the center. So if I let off, you can see that it's rotated. Now there's no equivalent for that over here. That is just simply a visual control. If I undo that, it'll go back to horizontal. And the last one I want to show you is this diamond down here in the lower left-hand corner. And this is the same as my slant control. So I can click, and if I drag towards the text, I am going to slant to the right. If I drag the other way, I'm going to slant to the left. And if I let off now, and I look over here at my numerics, you can see that that is a negative number. So if I want to do this numerically, I can enter a negative number, it'll slant to the left. If I put a positive number in, it'll slant to the right. So I'm going to, again, click my undo button to undo that slant that I put in. And the last things I want to show you on the outside here are these little square boxes and these little round dots. So we're going to deal with the square boxes first, but before we talk about them, look at what's going on around the outside of my text. You can see there's a little dashed line that's hugging the text. This is what we call the text's envelope. So this is the envelope of the text, and it's telling the software where to draw these characters in, where to make the text stop and start vertically. All right? So this is the envelope of the text. I can modify that envelope by clicking and dragging these boxes in the corner. So if I click and drag up, I will make that edge come up to get a slant like that. Similarly, I could grab it. I'm sorry, I'm running out of space here with my mouse. Okay, here we go. I can drag it back down, and I can make it slant that way. If I drag this one up, I can start to get things like a pennant effect, and and I might drag these out further to further enhance that effect. So that's what these boxes on the corners do, and if I want to do this corner, obviously it's going to be these boxes. So I'm going to undo all of that to go back to where I was. Okay, so there we go, back to where I was. Now I want to show you my favorite ones controlling the envelope, and that's these dots. These dots allow me to put a bend in this line. So if I click and drag upwards, I'll put a convex bend in that line. If I drag downwards, I'll put a concave bend in that line. So let me just move it up like this, and I can do the same thing with the bottom. I don't have to go the same direction. I could do this, and I could get that kind of effect, which is what we call a convex bridge, dual convex bridge, or I could just come up like this and do a bridging type effect. But there's lots of different effects I can do by combining all of these controls. Again, I am going to undo all of that because the ones I want to show you now are the ones that we really care about for for this particular design. And that is these little orange boxes and blue diamonds. So orange boxes and blue diamonds in the center. So let's talk about the orange boxes first. What the orange boxes do is they give me control over an individual character. So if I, for example, click on this bee, you can see that I've got a new bounding box in green around it. I've got two sizing handles on the outside, and these are proportional sizing handles. So if I click and drag, I can make that individual bee bigger without affecting the rest of the text. And I can also, using the ones in the corners, rotate that bee. So I could rotate it, and then also using the one in the center, the actual square again, I can move this bee anywhere I want. So I can move it anywhere. I can move it off the baseline, move it way over here if I want to. Now I really don't want to do any of that, so I'm going to undo all of that, get back to normal bee. All right, so that's what those orange boxes do. And if I'm looking at this design right here, if I'm looking at the way this text is spaced, I kind of think there's too much space between the I and the B. So I could use this orange box to move the B over. If I do that, I have to be careful not to move off the baseline. I have to drag it very closely in that direction so I can tighten up that space. But you see, when I do that, I've created more space between the B and the O. And that's not what I want to do. I could move the O over, but of course then I have to move the M, and it gets very tedious to do it that way. So obviously there's a better way to do that. So I'm going to undo both of those. And what I want to show you now is these blue diamonds, and these are my favorite. The blue diamonds allow you to adjust the inner character spacing in a very, very cool way. So the way they work is, if I click and drag a diamond, everything to the right of it moves, everything to the left of it stays there, but any adjustments I have already made, they don't change. So for example, if I want to increase the spacing between the O and the M, because I think they're a little bit closer together, I can click and drag this one over a little bit. And I also want to do the same thing here. So I'm going to click and drag that one over a little bit. And now those look pretty good to me. So I'm going to adjust this one. So watch as I drag this one between the B and the I move everything over. And notice that my spacing that I've already set hasn't been affected. So it doesn't matter what order I do these in. I am not going to mess up the adjustments that I've made. So for example, I think there's a little bit not enough space between the two I's, so let me adjust that one over this way a little bit. So now I've got a little bit better spacing there. I want to make a little bit more spacing between the M and the D, so let me do that. I think the D and the Q look okay, but I want to tighten this space up here, so I'm going to drag this guy over. And even though I have adjusted all my spacing, and you notice when I started to do that, my M started to get into these stitches. Now that everything's adjusted, you can see I'm pretty much perfectly centered again. So that's pretty cool. If I needed to adjust it, I could use the hand and move it over. But if I want to use my nudge tools, they don't work in text mode. If I want to nudge this over a little bit, I have to go back to normal select mode in order to get my nudging to work in this mode. But I think this is close enough to center for this particular purpose, so I'm going to leave that alone. What we're going to do now is we're going to actually enter some new text in. So I am going to click off of it again. You notice my cursor comes back, and we're going to put in here 2 lines of text now. So we are going to put in by, and then on the next line, the name of the person. And when you're doing this, hopefully you'll put in your own name. So I'm going to come kind of down in here, and I'm going to click. And of course, when I do that, it puts in my text again, and it zoomed out so I could see it all. So I am going to come over here to my text box, and we're first going to select it all, and then I'm going to delete it all, and I am going to put in BY in lowercase. And before I do anything else, I'm going to press return or enter to get down to the next line. You can see how my cursor went down to the next line. So I'm now going to type in the name, and I'm going to use the same name that's in our example here. So I'm going to type in Susan and then space and then Shaw. And now I'm going to change the height of that back to 0.5. So I'm going to change that to 0.5 before I do anything else. So I'm going to change that to 0.5. And I am going to click Apply. Now you'll notice here that before I click Apply, this is right or left aligned rather, but since my actual alignment is center, when I click Apply, that two pieces of text are going to be centered with respect to each other, which is actually what I want to happen. All right, so I want that by in the middle. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to just, whoops, you see how I didn't pay attention to my hand? I just went and clicked and dragged without looking, and I dragged that S over. Good news is I've got an undo button, so I'm going to put it back. Now I've got the hand. I'm going to click and drag, and I'm going to center this in our design right about there. I'm just doing it visually, and that looks pretty close. Now, if you look close down here, you'll see that the W and the A are on top of each other, not what I want, so I am going to adjust that. So I'm going to use my zoom tool to get in here so you can see a little bit better what I'm doing. I'm going to go make sure I go back to text mode, and I am going to hover over that blue diamond, which might be a little hard for you to see, but it's right here. So I'm going to click and drag that over a little bit to get a little bit of spacing. I'm making sure that I'm not on top of my stitches over here, so that's okay. Again, I will double click the magnifying glass to see what's going on with the whole thing here, and that looks pretty good. Now, normally we would end right here, but you're going to put in your own name, not Susan Shaw. And in case you were wondering who Susan Shaw is actually Rita's sister, and she really helps us out a lot with these projects by testing them all, and that's the reason that her name is in here in this example. So we are going to put in a different name, and I'm going to put in my name. I'm going to come back here. I'm going to type over Susan Shaw. I'm going to put in Mark with a space and then G-A-R-E-T-C, which is my name. Thankfully, I still remember how to spell it, and I'm going to click Apply. And the reason I'm doing this is because I want to show you what kind of situations you can get into and how you can get out of them. So you see as I did that, because that name was bigger, my text height to 0.5 is no longer going to work because the Z is out here over my border stitches, and I don't want that. So I've got a couple ways I could fix it. I showed you one of them. I could grab this width control, and I could just make the text skinnier until it fits. And you know what? That looks pretty good. I really can't tell that they're much skinnier than this because the software does a great job of trying to hide that. But if I wanted to do it a different way, if I wanted to undo that, if I actually wanted to make it smaller so it fit, I could use my width icon and make it smaller like that. So let me actually just do it a little bit more. And now that looks pretty good. So you know what? I'm going to just position that over a little bit, and that looks pretty good. But you can see here I've got another problem, don't I? This Y is descending down into the G. Now, it wasn't that way when we had Susan Shaw up here because this Y happened to go in the space between the letters. But you may run into some issues as you're putting multi-lines of text in where this Y doesn't, the descenders on these characters like the Y hit something in the line below. So what we want to do is we want to increase the space between the lines so that doesn't happen. Now you might be tempted, like you would be on a word processor, to come over here and put in another blank line. Now there's nothing preventing you from doing that, but I don't think it looks all that hot to do that. So what we're going to do is use our line spacing controls to adjust that. And that's the reason that I'm doing this little exercise for you. So I'm going to adjust my line spacing. I'm going to make this value bigger because I want more spacing between the lines. There's no visual way to do it over here. I have to do it numerically. So I'm just going to take a guess at 40%, and I'm going to click Apply, and we'll see how that looks. And yes, that looks pretty good. I've got some spacing in there now. In fact, I might want to go a little bit more. Let me go to 43%. Click Apply. And yeah, I like that a little bit better. But now my M and my Z are pretty close to my edge. So I could make this smaller again, but I've got some more space up here I can work with. So I am just going to move this up a little bit to get these off the edge. And I'm going to click off it so you can see what we've created here. And this is my label. Now you might be asking why we didn't just type this all together. And the reason is because we wanted a different size for the 2016 and a different size for this one, and then yet again another size for this one. There is no way to do multiple sizes with multi-line text. If you need different sizes of text on different lines, then each line has to be by itself. But the good news is no one can actually tell that we had to put this one in and then this one in and then we put these two in together. So no one can actually tell that, so it's okay. Now the next thing we need to do and the last thing we need to do is simply save this design so that we can stitch it out. So you want to come up here to your save icon and click that. And you want to be in your November 2016 folder. And you don't have to be, but this is a good place to put it. So this folder will be automatically created for you if you downloaded this month's design, which you probably did. But I'm going to show you where it is just in case. So if I go up one level, here's my Novembers, and here's my MDQ projects. In fact, let me do it this way so you can see. It's under C, Floriani, Designs, MDQ Project, November 2016. So that's where we're going to save it. Now, I've been practicing this, so I've already saved it as my 2016 MDQ2 BOM label. So I'm going to change it to a different name this time. I'm going to put in Mark 2016 BOM label. I'm naming it just a little bit different, and I'm going to say save. And that's going to save it automatically and by default in the WAF format, which is our internal format. And you want to get in the habit of saving your files in that format. And then the next step is to save it in our machine format so we can stitch it out. In order to do that, I'm going to come here and click File and Save As. And when I do that, I can select with this drop down in the format, Save As Type, I can choose a different format to save it in. So if I was saving it in the Viking VP3 format, I could choose that format and I could save it. You see I've already got one in here in that format. I would come in here and retype in my name. I would say Mark 2016 BOM label. I could shortcut click that. I'm going to get rid of the WAF and click Save, and I will save that format for the Viking. So obviously you would save it for whatever machine format you need to stitch it out in. So that's our software section for this month's webinar. Let's go back to our PowerPoint and we will bring up our assembly instructions. Okay, so you've already seen the opening screen here, so we're going to go beyond that. Here again is our label, and like I was talking about, you can see how that Y comes down conveniently between the Susan and the Shaw. And here again is our finished quilt, and we're going to move right on into the materials that you're going to require for this month's project. So you're going to need some Floriani nylon no-show mesh fusible stabilizer. And I just want to make sure you understand we want the fusible one for this particular month. All the other 12 months we've been using the non-fusible. This last month we're going to use the fusible version. You're going to need some fabric for your label, and you want about a 7 by 6 inch piece. You're going to have backing fabric, and for that you're going to need 2.5 yards of backing fabric. You're going to need some binding fabric, and you have a choice here of either using separate fabric for the binding, or you can self-bind this quilt with the binding fabric, and we'll go into a little bit more detail when we get to that section. And you're going to need some embroidery and bobbin thread, and you want to choose top colors that work well with your fabric choices. And you're going to need a minimum 6 inch by 6 inch or 150 millimeter by 150 millimeter hoop size to complete the embroidery part of this. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to cut a section of fusible Floriani nylon no-show mesh, and it wants to be large enough to fit in the hoop with about a 1 to 2 inch overlap all the way around. Now the stabilizer itself is not shown in this diagram. What you're seeing is the fabric. So it's important that your stabilizer be big enough to be caught around all of the edges of the hoop. The fabric, however, we're not going to have to do that because we are going to fuse this fabric to the stabilizer and we're going to fuse it right side up. So the way you're going to do this is you're going to put your stabilizer down on your ironing surface with the shiny side or the fusible side facing up, and then you're going to put your fabric with the wrong side facing down, again with its right side facing up. Then you're going to want to cover the whole thing with either a Teflon pressing sheet or a piece of parchment paper, and that's in order to keep your iron from sticking to the edges of the stabilizer. They're going to be peeking out from around the fabric. So once you've got the fabric fused down, you want to go ahead and hoop it, and then we're going to put the hoop in the machine. We're going to load the 2016 MDQII BOM label design into the machine and just go ahead and stitch it. And it's got two colors, but if by now you haven't figured out that you need to change the thread, well, you should. All right, so we're going to move on. And once you've got it stitched out, you remove the label from the hoop, and then you're going to trim and fold the edges under to make a nice edge all the way around the label. And I'm going to give you a real good tip here. Our R&K Stitch Perfection tape, that's our double-sided water-soluble tape, makes this job a whole heck of a lot easier. So what you're going to do is you're going to trim your label to the size that you want, plus whatever fold under hem that you want. And then you're going to pick the appropriate size, either half or quarter-inch R&K Stitch Perfection tape. Tape it to the raw edge. So you're going to put a piece of tape down on the raw edge on the back side, and then you can just fold it over, and you don't have to pin it or anything, and that tape is going to hold it in place. Repeat that for all the other edges, and if you want to get fancy and miter your corners and do whatever, you can. But that's going to make your job a whole lot easier. No ironing, no pinning, and then you're going to put it on the back, and again, you can use some more Stitch Perfection tape to hold it in place, or you can pin it in place. And then you want to hand stitch this to the back of your quilt when we are done. So not right now, but when we get done with the whole thing. So that's the embroidery part, and we're going to move on to the quilt assembly and finishing. So the first thing we want to do is we want to arrange our blocks in a pattern that is 6 blocks wide by 8 blocks long. And obviously you're going to want to rearrange your block layout until you come up with something that you like. And you can use the photograph that we've given you as an example if you want to copy that, but there's absolutely no need to do that. You can do it any way you like. Now there's two different options for laying out the blocks other than which block goes where because of the way the colors are in this. You can arrange them either side by side, which is example A, or you can rotate the blocks, which is example B. And if you can't tell the difference between these two, if you look closely at example A, you'll see that the corner points are corner triangles in example A. The colors don't match each other. They're alternating colors. And in example B, the corners all match in colors so that we've got all the darks in one spot and all the lights in another. And that, to my eye, makes a much more pleasing effect. But if you like the effect in example A, you can do that. Another advantage of example B is that if you're not so precise when you put your blocks together and your points don't match perfectly, example B hides it much better than example A. So again, any way you want to do it, it's up to you. The next thing we're going to go over is our reference for our row numbers and our column letters. And so this is a diagram of the finished quilt. So our row is going to go across the top, row 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and 6, and then A through H in our columns going down the side. So this is your reference, and we're going to go on to assembling our rows and columns. So the first thing we're going to do is we're going to sew the rows together. So what you want to do is you want to line block A up with block B, and this is from row 1. So you're going to take block A and block B. Easiest way to do that is from your layout, flip block B upside down onto block A, and that'll keep everything in the alignment that you worked so hard to create. When you do that, your right sides are going to be together. Take it over to your sewing machine, and you're going to sew these two together on the stitched guideline that was stitched out as part of the block. When you're done sewing it together, you want to press that seam open and not to the side, and that's going to help reduce the bulk in the seam if you press it open rather than onto the side. Next, you want to repeat this with blocks C and D, blocks E and F, and G and H. So what we will have created is 4 units, a block AB unit, a CD unit, an EF unit, and a GH unit. Next, we're going to sew the AB unit to the CD unit, and then we're going to sew the EF unit to the GH unit, doing it exactly the same as we did with the blocks. And again, we're going to press those seams open, and then we're going to finally sew our ABCD unit to the EFGH unit that we created in the previous step. We're going to press that seam open, and that creates our first row, and you want to repeat that process for rows 2 through 6. And just a little hint, when you get your row done, put it back down on the floor or your quilt table, or your, if you have one of those felt quilt, let me start again. If you have one of those felt quilt guide things that where you put it on the wall, you can use that. All right, so put them back as you get them sewn together so you don't get them messed up in the order. All right, now we are going to put our columns together, and we're going to kind of do that like we did the blocks, but now we're going to be sewing our rows together. So we are going to sew row 1 to row 2 and press that seam open. We're going to sew row 3 to row 4 and press that seam open. Finally, row 5 to row 6 and press that seam open. Next, we're going to take our row 1, 2 unit and sew it to our 3, 4 unit. And then lastly, all we need to do is sew the row 1, 2, 3, 4 unit that we just created to the 5, 6 unit. And that gets the top and the batting of our quilt assembled. So now what we're going to do is we're going to put on our backing fabric and bind it. So what you want to do is you want to take your backing fabric and lay it out with the right side facing down, so the wrong side facing up. And you want to center your quilt top on that backing fabric, wrong sides together. So that means that the top of your quilt will be facing up. Now you want to pin or use stitch perfection tape to attach the top to the back. And like I said, you can either pin it, or again, you can use the double-sided stitch perfection tape to do that. Remember that that stitch perfection tape is water soluble, so it will dissolve away if you wash this quilt. And if you're going to pin it, a little hint is to put your pins in the center of the blocks and don't let them overlap the seams. That way, as we do our stitch in the ditch in the next step, which we're going to be going along the seam lines, you won't have to stop every so often and pull your pins out. It'll go a lot faster. So once you get your quilt top centered and attached with your pins or stitch perfection tape, you're going to put it in your sewing machine, and you're going to use your stitch in the ditch foot or your edging foot, or if you're good, by eye, and stitch in the ditch between the rows, rotating the quilt 180 degrees at the start of each row. So you're going to go up one row and down the other. And when you finish all the rows, then what we want to do is rotate the entire quilt 90 degrees, and we're going to again stitch in the ditch along the columns, rotating 180 degrees at the start of each column. And when you're done with that, you have quilted your quilt. And you might think that, you know, this isn't going to look so hot because there's no quilting stitches, but if you'll recall our block design has those quilting stitches built in. So when you look at the top of the quilt, it's going to look like you quilted it very precisely on a long arm machine, but if you don't tell anybody, no one will know you did it in your embroidery machine. So it's going to look very, very nice from the top, and it's going to look very, very clean from the back because the only stitches you'll see are the ones going up and down the columns and the rows. Lastly, you want to trim your backing fabric and bind it as desired. And you can either, like I said earlier, use separate binding strips to do this, or if you want to, you can self-bind it by folding the back fabric up to the top. And, you know, you can do that as simple or as fancy as you like. And one more tip if you want to do that, the Stitch Perfection tape works really well for folding and holding that binding into place. So that completes our assembly of the quilt. We want to thank everybody for attending, and we hope you will use this video along with the printed PDF instructions to recreate this project at home. We hope that you'll come back next month for our next webinar. Next month we are not going to be doing a quilt. We're going to be back to doing a few projects before we get back to some quilts, but of course you will learn a lot of quilting techniques as we do those projects. We want to remind you not to forget to post your quilt blocks and your finished quilt on the Floriani Embroidery Facebook page, because if you do that, you post your blocks and you post your quilt, in a couple months we're going to be going and looking at all of the posts, and we will be picking several of the quilts, and we're going to be awarding some prizes to the quilts that we feel look the best. We're going to give you a couple months to do that, so we'll probably be doing that in maybe the end of January, maybe the beginning of February, and we'll be awarding some prizes to our best quilt. So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to DJ for any final words he might want to say. DJ, are you
I
there?
am here. I want to share something with you.
Oh, goody.
So I've got one finished quilt here.
I don't think we can see your screen, DJ. I think you need to take control back.
I just did. So do you see it?
Oh, I see it now. Yes, I was hiding on my screen. Sorry about that.
So this was already posted, so somebody really got on top of this last project and finished their quilt, and I think it looks absolutely beautiful. I love I'm a big fan of black and white or black and cream, and I think it came out really, really well. And you can see that they do have the label on the back. They folded it over. So
yeah, they made it into an octagon, so that's pretty cool. So, no, I'm sorry, it's a hexagon. Made it into a hexagon, so that's pretty cool. And I really like the way that the black and the white outline that oval. It just changes the whole look of it. And I think, and I know DJ will agree with me that, even though you're all stitching out the same thing, by using all these different fabrics and thread combinations, you really come out with some stunning looking quilts and stunning differences between what they all look like.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, from the example that showed at the beginning of the one that that was done along the way from Rita, I mean, this looks totally different just because the different fabrics and different colors. And so thank you, Nancy. This looks great. Thank you for sharing it already. And like Mark, I'm looking forward to seeing what all you guys come up with and how they come together. And so make sure you do share it on Facebook, and we're looking forward to giving some prizes to those who do. So thank you, Mark, for another great webinar, and we are looking forward to the next one. So until next time, thank you, everyone, and we'll see you again soon.
All right, bye-bye, everybody.